On Bolton in Seoul, President Trump's top national security aide is holding crunch talks with senior South Korean officials on Japan's trade curbs, as well as alliance-related matters. After a 24-hour delay, back into the fray. South Korea and Japan will lay out their respective cases over Tokyo's crushing trade restrictions on Seoul at the WTO's HQ in Geneva. Plus, down it goes again. The IMF cuts its global growth forecast for this year and the next. It says the sluggishness is somewhat self-inflicted by the US-China trade war and uncertainties over Brexit. So let's start with John Bolton in Seoul for high-stakes talks with officials here. There is plenty to chew over. The US National Security Advisor is currently in talks with his South Korean counterpart. We are going to get all the latest from our presidential office correspondent Shin Se-min. Se-min, what do you have for us today?
Mark, we are learning that John Bolton is already here at the top office for talks with his South Korean counterpart, Chung Eui-yong. And prior to that, we also know that Bolton met with the floor leader of the main opposition Liberty Korea Party, Da Kyung-won, upon Da's request. Now, what we know from that meeting is that the party leader strongly expressed how Japan's retaliatory trade restrictions against South Korea is damaging trilateral cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, one of the major talking points for the visiting U.S. official. It is Bolton's first solo trip to Seoul, perhaps indicating the gravity of the pending issues that would require such high-level U.S. consultation. Now, the ongoing trade spat between Seoul and Tokyo, two of America's closest allies, is one priority. But there is also likely that the issue of the slow progress on the North Korea denuclearization drive will also be included. And South Korean officials will likely press the U.S. to step in on Japan's trade restrictions to South Korea, also a critical issue for the U.S., as the rift between the two Asian countries could jeopardize a number of issues. With Seoul perhaps raising the possibility of ditching the General Security of Military Information Agreement, known as DG-SOMIA, with Tokyo, that would deal a great blow to Washington's pursuit of beefier three-way security cooperation. It's seen as the key to countering North Korean threats, as well as checking China's growing military clout in the region. And the two may also hold consultations on the Strait of Hormuz, as the U.S. is hoping to build a multinational force to safeguard commercial shipping in that area amid the tensions with Iran and its activities there in recent weeks. And once the meeting at the top office wraps, Bolton will hold separate talks with South Korea's defense chief and top diplomat before leaving Seoul at 4 p.m. Mark, and we will have more on this as we learn the details. Back to you.
OK, thank you very much. That was our Shin Se-min at the presidential office there. Whistle-stop tour for John Bolton. We'll find out much more, I'm sure, in the evening today after he's left. Now, all eyes will be on the Swiss city of Geneva again today, namely on the WTO General Council meeting, when South Korea and Japan go toe-to-toe over Tokyo's harsh tech-related trade curbs on Seoul. The issue was supposed to be discussed on Tuesday, but that meeting ran long due to discussions happening over other agenda items. Kim Hyo-sun has this report.
Discussions at the WTO General Council on Japan's trade restrictions on South Korea have been pushed to Wednesday due to time constraints. It was listed as the 11th agenda among the 17 items set for Tuesday's meeting. But the meeting went longer than expected, with the Council agreeing to meet again Wednesday to discuss the remaining agenda items. While the meeting lasted nearly 6 hours, excluding the recess, the member states only managed to discuss up to item number 8. During the annual meeting of the International Trade Watchdog's top decision-making body, aside from the ministerial conferences, many developing countries raised their voices on the effectiveness of WTO's aid programs. Seoul's Deputy Trade Minister Kim Seung-ho, who is leading Seoul's delegation, was not fazed by the delay.
I will stand there with the same attitude to explain our stance.
While Kim was expected to confront Shingo Yamagami, Director General of the Japanese Foreign Ministry's Economic Affairs Bureau, during the meeting, Yamagami only showed up as the meeting was wrapping up. The Japanese ambassador to Geneva, Junichi Ihara, was present for most of the meeting.
We will listen to South Korea's opinions as it requested the issue to be dealt with as an agenda item, and then explain our stance courteously and clearly.
Yamagami also explained Tokyo's measures to not go against the WTO spirit of free trade. With Seoul and Tokyo certain to clash over Japan's trade restrictions, it's left to be seen whose side the international community will take in the increasingly bitter fight. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's trade minister is in Washington in a bid to win support from the US as Seoul faces heightened tensions with Japan over Tokyo's trade restrictions. Arriving on Tuesday local time, Yoo Myung-hee told reporters she will highlight that Japan's move hurt the international economy as well as South Korea's. Minister Yoo will also stress the price of semiconductor components, especially DRAM chips, have jumped 23% in just 2 weeks, adding this could have big repercussions for the global economy. She's expected to meet with various US economic and trade leaders before departing later this week. Now, in other news, the International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast for this year and the next, sending a warning that the US-China trade war, as well as uncertainty surrounding Brexit, could put the brakes on growth around the world. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
In its latest World Economic Outlook report Tuesday, the IMF cut its forecast for global growth in 2019 and 2020, sending a warning that the US-China tariff spat and Brexit could lead to a further slowdown, weakened investment, and a disruption to global supply chains. According to the IMF, downside risks have intensified, and it now expects global growth to be 3.2% this year and 3.5% next year, a decrease of 0.1 percentage point for both years from its previous forecast in April. The IMF's latest downgrade is the fourth cut since October. The global lender says economic data so far this year and softening inflation point to weaker than expected activity, with trade and technology tensions adding to the bleak forecast. The IMF also slashed its forecast for global trade growth by 0.9 percentage point to 2.5% for this year, but said trade growth should rebound to 3.7% in 2020, but that's still 0.2 percentage point under its previous forecast. However, the IMF paints a rosier picture for advanced economies such as the United States. The IMF raised its forecast for the U.S. to 2.6% in 2019, but left its 2020 forecast unchanged at 1.9%. The IMF also upgraded its global forecast for the Eurozone to 1.6% in 2020, leaving its 2019 outlook unchanged at 1.3%. The IMF urged countries to work at the multilateral level to reduce trade tensions, also calling for efforts to ensure the continued enforcement of existing World Trade Organization rules. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The US Department of Justice has indicted 4 people working for a Chinese company for engaging in obscure financial dealings in an effort to evade US weapons sanctions on North Korea. The indictment by a federal grand jury in New Jersey on Tuesday was aimed at the owner and 3 managers of Dandong Hongxiang Industrial Development. They face charges of sanctions violations, conspiracy to defraud the US, and conspiracy to launder money. The company is alleged to have used around 20 front companies to build illicit financial dealings for North Korean entities that were involved in the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. There was a day of drama over the skies of South Korea on Tuesday, and one that could have some serious diplomatic repercussions. Numerous Chinese and Russian military aircraft entered South Korea's air defense identification zone, causing the South Korean Air Force to engage them and actually fire warning shots. Furious with the flagrant violation of its airspace, South Korea summoned officials from the 2 countries' embassies to protest in the strongest possible terms. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
5 foreign military aircraft entered South Korea's Air Defense Identification Zone, or KADIZ, without authorization on Tuesday morning. 2 of the jets were Chinese, while the other 3 were Russian. The incident started after 2 Chinese H-6 aircraft entered the northwestern part of KADIZ at 6:44 a.m. and went in and out of KADIZ until later joined by 2 Tu-95 Russian bombers. Then they headed south. The jets were flying close at an estimated 3 to 6 kilometers away from each other. South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff said it was the first time Chinese and Russian planes have entered KADIZ simultaneously. An early warning and control A-50 Russian aircraft then trespassed into the East Sea twice near Dokdo Island, first at around 9 a.m. for a total of 7 minutes. This prompted the Air Force to scramble fighter jets and fire a total of 360 rounds of warning shots after the Russian pilot didn't respond to repeated audio warnings. Officials said it's the first time the Air Force fired warning shots towards a foreign airplane due to airspace violation. The Russian aircraft stayed in the KADIZ for a total of 1 hour and 33 minutes on Tuesday, while the Chinese jets stayed there for a total of 1 hour and 25 minutes. In response, Seoul's Foreign and Defense Ministry summoned officials from China and Russia's embassies to severely protest against the violations.
I should say Russian Federation never threat Republic of Korea. It's very important.
Did it have anything to do with John Bolton's visit to South Korea? Did North Korea involve in your actions today?
I have to mention one thing. Air recognition area is not airspace, okay?
Seoul's defense ministry said it has expressed regret to the officials and strongly requested for preventative measures. Regarding the Russian aircraft violating South Korea's airspace, the ministry said it sees it as a grave incident, and if similar actions happen again, it warned Seoul will put all options on the table to respond accordingly. Seoul's foreign ministry and the Blue House echoed the remarks. The top office director of national security Chung Yong sent a message to Nikolai Patrushev, the secretary of the Security Council of the Russian Federation. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, the US says it strongly supports South Korea and Japan's response to the, quote, airspace incursions by Russian and Chinese warplanes. Replying to a query by Seoul-based Yonhap News, Pentagon spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Dave Eastburn said the US Department of Defense is in close coordination with its South Korean and Japanese allies and will continue to monitor activities as it follows up with its Russian and Chinese counterparts through diplomatic channels. He added that the US commitment to the defense of its allies, South Korea and Japan, is, quote, ironclad. We are going to start our look at the world news today in the United Kingdom. Britain will have a new Prime Minister later on this Wednesday, and he's a well-known face in UK politics. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Hong Yoo. So give us the details on what was an exciting but not particularly unexpected day in London.
Former London Mayor Boris Johnson will become Britain's new Prime Minister on Wednesday after he won the contest against the UK's Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt on Tuesday to lead the governing Conservative Party. He takes over from outgoing Prime Minister Theresa May. As soon as he arrives in 10 Downing Street, Johnson will be tasked with fulfilling his promise to lead the UK out of the European Union by October 31st. In his first speech after being elected, Johnson said he will deliver Brexit, unite the country, and defeat opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn.
I say to all the doubters, dude, we are going to energise the country. We're going to get Brexit done on October the 31st. We're going to take advantage of all the opportunities that it will bring in a new spirit of can-do.
Johnson, a hardliner on Brexit, has said multiple times that the UK should leave the EU on the original time schedule of October 31st, even if it's a no-deal Brexit. But he already faces opposition from several Conservative ministers that will not allow the UK to leave without a divorce deal, suggesting Johnson will have a turbulent start as Britain's new leader. Former Chinese Premier Li Peng died Monday at the age of 90, one of the country's most influential but controversial political leaders. Li is the only Chinese leader to have served both as the nation's premier and chairman of the national legislature. While China's state-run Xinhua news agency described Li's death as a great loss for the nation, many human rights activists call him a, quote, sinner, holding him responsible for the deadly crackdown on pro-democracy protesters at Tiananmen Square in 1989. Two of the biggest earthquakes to hit California in nearly a decade have sparked more than 80,000 aftershocks in the Ridgecrest area since July 4th. Experts say the two major tremors, clocking in at magnitudes 6.4 and 7.1, have caused an active aftershock sequence, but it's starting to slow down. The Ridgecrest earthquakes are especially worrying as they were relatively close to Koso volcanic field, one of the nation's largest producers of geothermal power. Officials at the aftershocks have been creeping into areas close to two major earthquake faults, which could lead to a quake of magnitude 8 or higher.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information we hope is useful for your everyday life. Today, I'm happy to say we have our business correspondent Kim Hae-sang in the studio to discuss a trend. It's called Newtro, that's expanding in popularity here in South Korea. So Hae-sang, thanks for joining us and tell us more about this latest trend to hit the country.
Right, Mark. So Newtro is a combination of new and retrospect, referring to a new interpretation of retro culture. So, and this Newtro theme is gaining popularity across the retail industry, with those in their teens and 20s sharing Newtro-related products and experiences on Instagram. In Ulji로 Jonglo in downtown Seoul, there are more than a dozen boutique shops that rent out clothes like dresses and suits and accessories from the late 19th century to the early 20th century, 개화기, the so-called Enlightenment period when Western culture arrived. The shops lend the clothes for 3 hours for less than $30 and customers can take selfies either inside or outside the shop.
The first shop opened late last year thanks to the popularity of Korean dramas like Mr. Sunshine that showcased 90s culture. The dresses became popular among women in their 20s and it has continued this year. The number of boutique shops is continuing to grow as demand from people in their 30s and 40s is also rising.
I wanted to make some special memories with my college friend. Wearing a hanbok in traditional palaces used to be the thing to do. Now this is a new hip trend.
So that's from a photo booth in Ulji로. You can actually spot quite a lot of people wearing those dresses in Ulji로, and to suit their needs, there are photo booths and special photo zones at cafes or restaurants in the area.
That's quite interesting because Ulji로 used to have this rather old-fashioned image where mostly old people would go there to hang out, but these days it seems young people are going there to try this new trend, Newtro. Why this area in particular? And also, I want to know what other retailers are moving in to try and take advantage of this Newtro trend.
Well, just to give you a background, Ulji로 is named after General Ulji Mundok of the 7th century, who successfully defended Goguryeo, one of the three kingdoms of Korea, against China's Sui dynasty. And Ulji로, you can get a taste of the industrial history of Korea with industrial machine shops or tool shops, printing shops, and traditional houses. These buildings have been renovated into restaurants and stores, a mix of traditional interior, as you can see, and design with modern eateries and bakeries. For example, a cafe in the 1900s style, the wood tables, traditional roof, teapots, and mirrors all look traditional.
I like how it's traditional tea, but it's served in these iced glasses. It's interesting. We've heard of the 1900s lifestyle, but I've never experienced it myself. I was always curious about it, and it's nice to try something like this.
It's like traveling back in time or something when you go into one of those cafes. But we see how trends come and go really quickly, especially here in Korea. It's all the rage one day and then no one tries it or uses it the next day. But how long do you think this Newtro trend is going to last?
Well, this Newtro trend hasn't reached its peak yet. It's still growing, and it's not just the restaurants or dresses. It also includes other types of goods like Jillo soju. They released their previous version of the 1970s, and since it's released in April, sales of those have hit like over 10 million units in 3 months, so that's pretty big. And brands like Fila have released a remake of their shoes from the 1970s. Nintendo, Tencent, they have released retro games like Super Mario Bros. Now, take a listen to an expert on why he believes Newtro is so popular in Korea.
Newtro is a new interpretation of the past. It triggers nostalgia among the older generation, and the younger generation is curious about things they see as new and hip. In a business sense, products are flooding the market and there's no limit to new content. So Newtro really meets demand. It'll likely continue to evolve and last for some time to come.
Okay, so maybe this is one trend that will last quite a long time here in South Korea. There are plenty of interesting products and also activities you can do if you enjoy Newtro. As always, Hae-sung, thank you very much for the information, and we'll see you again next time.
My pleasure.
Now, let's get a look at some Seoul city news. The capital's metropolitan government, for the first time, plans to designate a quarry used for constructing one of the Joseon dynasty's royal tombs as part of the city's cultural heritage. The quarry on Bukhansan Mountain in the northern part of the city is the first such site to have its exact location known. The engraved rocks, as you can see at the site, say the quarry was used to build a royal tomb in the 17th century and was off limits to those without authorization.
Good morning. Most regions saw tropical nights as overnight lows were above 25 degrees Celsius, and the hot weather is here to stay. A heat wave warning is in place for Daegu and parts of the Gyeongsang-Bukdo and Gangwon-do provinces with an expected high of 35 degrees. And of course, searing hot days are leading to uncomfortable, sweaty afternoons and sleepless nights. So most people get sensitive and uncomfortable during the peak heat of the day. Try to stay in the shade or in air-conditioned places. And the high humidity on health. Many inner regions will see 5 to 40 millimeters of passing showers. Seoul already had some. And that's not going to give us any relief from the heat, as daily highs will be ranging from 30 to 35 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Try to avoid caffeine, very sweet drinks, and alcohol as they make dehydration worse. Thankfully, relief is on its way as the last round of monsoon rain will bring bearable temperatures to the country starting tomorrow. But do expect up to 300 millimeters of heavy showers in the central region. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV, plenty more coming up. And a reminder that our next newscast is coming up in around 90 minutes at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.